Assalamu alaikum. Khalid Al-Mash'an, I'm the chairman of KGBC, Kuwait. We're a part of a bigger organization from 75 countries. I welcome you today, and I'm so happy to see so many people here, because 3 years ago, we wouldn't have imagined to see so many faces that are interested in the subject. I first would like to thank Sharifa and Gulf Consult for their continuous support for KGBC and hosting this event today. KGBC is a non-profit organization. It's non-governmental, and we aim to raise awareness on sustainability and construction being more efficient in Kuwait. Today's subject is quite important, and as you've seen lately, public sector needs to be aware of the way we are taking the sector forward. Also, the subsidies in Kuwait is not sustainable. We need to raise awareness for this and be prepared for the next phase in development. There's an important issue that we need to address is how is the relationship between the developers, the architects, and the construction, and then have a smooth delivery to the end user. I wish you a successful session, and thank you very much again for coming.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I'd like to welcome you here to our new headquarters on behalf of Gulf Consult. We have just recently moved here over a year ago. Gulf Consult has been a member with Kuwait Green Building Council since 2019, and we've had so many events with them, collaborating on different events, but this is the first time that we've had our event hosted here in our head office, and hopefully we will have many other events coming forward on this event. Hopefully we will have many other events happening over here hosted by us. So I hope you enjoy the lecture, and we look forward to welcoming you here again on future events. Thank you very much.
We would like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Aditi. She is the business development lead from OneClick LCA. OneClick LCA is one of the leading software data-driven software solution providers, who is not only providing lifecycle assessment for projects, but product-based solutions, EPDs also. I will let Ms. Aditi take over, and then we will be followed by panelists.
So thank you so much, first of all, to Gulf Consult and also to Kuwait Green Building Council for inviting us here, and also for organizing, this event. It is really, really very well organized. So thank you again from OneClick LCA side. Okay, so the beginning of the session, as was a part of the theme, would be to understand building lifecycle assessments. And that's what I'm going to try to cover as much as I can, because I know the other speakers are also going to talk more and more in this regard. So why lifecycle assessment? The first and the foremost reason, probably what you all know already or have heard from a lot of different places, is construction and manufacturing cause almost half of all environmental damage. And that's a lot if you look at all those red bars over there. What this means and what it affects at the end is the building stock is also estimated to double by 2060, and that's a huge amount. And all of this construction is actually estimated for Middle East, Asia, and Africa, all the developing economies moving forward. With so much of construction, what it's going to amount to is almost like we are building one New York City per month. And that's a huge amount of materials used, energy used in everything, basically. Another thing that you might also be aware of is something called as, well, you must have seen this bar chart already before, but basically what it says is the green bar that you see over there, embodied carbon, which I'll talk about a bit more to help you understand. That's going to be increasing more and more over time. So the more we make our energy grids greener, reduce emissions from them, the more the materials, the green part, is what is going to increase. And to give you an example, these emissions have already exceeded right now for some countries, for example, in Sweden and Norway, as you see over there. So this green part is going to be causing the most amount of carbon emissions moving forward if we are not tackling them well enough. And one last slide. So far, we are now in the era of carbon management, and that's the most crucial part of it, because we have been working quite extensively, as I mentioned, on the energy, decarbonizing the grid. A part of it has always also been implementing reduction in embodied carbon, decarbonization, and so on. But now it's going to be the full picture as a whole moving forward. And this is what we need to really, really start adapting faster and on a more, let's say, scalable way. So just to give a bit of a brief background on LCA, how does that come into the picture? For LCA, as you see on the left side over there, it's basically a quantitative method of assessing the environmental impacts, and that is both operational, so energy related, as well as those which are embodied, so those that come from materials. And these impacts are associated in the life cycle stages, either of a building, a process, or a product. And if you see over here, ISO is the most common basis of life cycle assessment all over the world. So those are the basic standards that are followed for life cycle assessment. Moving forward, you then have the EN standards, which are adapted to construction, buildings, some to products. So some of you may have also heard of environmental product declarations, most likely. These are more further attuned to the products themselves. And then moving down the level is the national regulations or the voluntary certifications that come into the picture. So you've also heard of LEED, maybe BREEAM, Living Building Challenge, as you see over here, GSAS, which is also one that is quite widely used in Kuwait, STDAMA and MOSTERAM, quite widely used in other GCC countries. So this is typically what you can always expect when you break down the level of detail for life cycle assessment. And a visual representation of it over here. So you have all the different stages where what is covered, as you can see in the product stage on the top, the construction, use, end of life, and energy is just one part of it. That is what the entire life cycle assessment is about. As I mentioned before, embodied carbon forms a part of that life cycle assessment. And this is something that I thought I'll just, add in here. I'm sure all of you are still aware of it, but I just thought I'll put it there into perspective because they are used quite interchangeably. And more often so, this has been the case. And you can, if you want to go again into where embodied carbon comes from, which is one of the main things I will also look at, would be all these stages again, as we saw before. So if you sum it up as a full picture now, you can see that for understanding your environmental impact of a building, what is the most important is, of course, your quantity of materials, so your bill of materials as it's referred to, and then the environmental impact of each material, each process, which is what would make up the total environmental impact of a building. That's how you would basically look at it in very simple terms. So we've covered all the LCA aspects of it, but what exactly are the applications of LCA, right? Like we really need to understand what would, LCA be used for in construction. It's quite widely used and it's becoming more and more mandatory moving forward. So as you know, probably already, certification schemes are one of the primary drivers of LCA. However, a lot of companies are also now moving towards making design choices on how you would work on a design based on an initial LCA done or an initial assessment done. This also helps to communicate transparency and understanding. And the different parts of regulation of the life cycle or the material impacts, building performance, and other things. I'll try to give a few examples of each of them as much as I can. But I don't want to cover a lot because this is also something that the next speaker will speak about. So a very simple picture and a slide that encompasses different, or let's say, where LCA is used and being adopted for widely. So not surprisingly, in regulations moving forward, quite more so often, to give you a global perspective, EU, USA, and recently also South Africa for certain products as well. They have made it mandatory to do an LCA. Then again, not surprisingly, one of the drivers is certification schemes. And the last, this is the one that is increasing highly, moving on, would be buyer requirements. And this is something that is going to be asked more and more in tenders, in any kind of, request for proposals that you would face moving forward. So it's essentially important to just understand what it is. So a short example again, you can see the difference in the different regions of certification, regulation, and standards. This is something that we've also published in a document that we had put called as Embodied Carbon Review. It's available online if you want to go look at it. But as you can see, international and more or less, let's say, international standards is one of the most important, as well as the certification-driven driver. Some examples of that, of how companies have been using certifications as a means of getting LCAs, quite from around the world, how they use it, as you can see over here. Then the next one that I would like to talk about, which I said previously, is helping comparisons and helping understand what to do, at what stage to do, and help to basically influence the carbon reduction potential. So here you can see what would happen in the initial stages, how much of an impact can you actually make if you are doing this by choosing what to work with, what type of materials are available, by building clever and even working on your designs. But this drastically reduces as you move forward. So the more you just start doing an LCA in the construction process, construction stage, the less, let's say, influential or the less ability to reduce carbon at that stage. So how to use an LCA? It's quite simple, really. Basically, understanding, assessing it, what you need to do, comparing it, and optimizing it in order to find hotspots and reduction opportunities. That's if I have to really, really simplify the whole essence of LCA and the need for it to be done. One example of that I will just give over here would be, here you can see how building typology actually impacts carbon. This is also from a real life project case as a whole. So you can see type, shape, size are quite essential, and they impact quite a lot the choice of the materials, the carbon driver, how or what type of materials you choose, what you're going to do with that requirement, and how much the carbon impact would be as a whole. So one small example of how it works. And then if you actually look at it more on a visual scale, you can see the per meter square of embodied carbon varies between the different types of buildings I just showed you. So the construction materials will cause the highest amount of embodied carbon moving forward, for, let's say, for educational buildings, and then for successively for others that you see over here. So it's really, really important how you build, with what you build, and the choices that you make, really. And of course, assuming that you have a uniform, renovation scale. Another one of life cycle impacts and choices is for refurbishments. So here, for example, you can actually see when you have built a building, of course, steel and concrete are going to play the biggest role. But then when you do have refurbishments at certain timescales, you can also see how much building systems are going to impact that more on top of that steel and concrete moving forward. So this is something that you can actually use the software for in order to make these comparisons. And last but not the least, one of the other things that you can also think of in terms of LCA is, putting it even beyond design. So making EPD specifications for lower carbon materials and products. That's one of the main things that are being asked for more and more, that most likely all manufacturers right now across GCC or even Europe or other countries are being required to submit. Assessing your designs, sharing different benchmarking databases. One of the ones that I can also mention over here is Schneider Electric, which has been, which has provided us also with their huge list of data as a whole in order to make it available for every other user of the software. And of course, to share the low impact design strategies. One example of projects making it mandatory from manufacturers to submit the carbon reduction or the transparency of a product in the form of an EPD. So I'll just summarize it quite shortly with what OneClick LCA is. We provide an LCA software for the construction and the manufacturing sector. We work quite extensively in the buildings, infrastructure, and the manufacturing segment as a whole. We are, members of different green building councils, working quite strongly with them to help raise awareness on life cycle assessment, whether it's on a building, infrastructure, or a project. What is something that would be useful here for the construction industry that is gathered is to be able to, work with the software from pre-design to as-built phase, because this is something that, as I showed you before, has the maximum impact, that you can actually drive LCA adoption within the company itself. Compliancy, of course, one of them, and the second one would be the global database. So you have access to these databases in order for you to help do this assessment. It wasn't probably possible so much 6 years, 7 years back, but now it is, because of this requirement and almost every other user, looking at providing the data transparently. And as I mentioned, you can use the software from strategy to construction, even to refurbishment, as well as to reporting. So it's not just a means of reporting, it's a means of also understanding what you can do from the beginning. One important aspect that I think that might actually be useful along with the building design would be looking at climate resiliency in the form of a microclimate solution. So EnviMet is one such tool that can actually help understand the impact the climate will have on humans, on the livestock, on plants, nature, everything around us, as well as help to understand how we can maybe reduce these heat islands that are being created due to so much of constructions that is going on. Last but not the least, how you can get your data. So it's not required that you have to manually fill in everything. It's quite simple to use, very easy to send the data from any tool that you use, even if it's simply an Excel file, to OneClick LCA in order to generate your calculation results. Yeah, and last but not the least, data, tools, compliance at your disposal, whichever one that you may need, whether it's LEAD v5, which is currently released, or the older versions of it, doesn't really matter. Some of the companies that have also been using it quite extensively, I can say over here, for example, in the GCC, Khatib al-Alami, Turner. Well, you can also look at these few companies that are in the GCC area. So yeah, that's it from me, and that's a bit about life cycle assessment and its role.
I'd like to invite our panelists to come here, please.
Thank you, Aditi, for the comprehensive keynote speech. Now we would like to have Dr. Isra Al-Isa from Kuwait University to share her insight and view on LCA from academic perspective. I personally follow Dr. Isra Al-Isa research because she's one of the few people in Kuwait who works on LCA, and she has done a tremendous job in assessing waste and construction life cycle assessment in different disciplines. So, Dr. Isra, are you ready to present? Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Thank you for organizing this event. Thank you so much. So my name is Isra Al-Isa. I'm from the Industrial Engineering Department at Kuwait University. The reason that I have been focusing on sustainability is because I have worked with remediating the soil post the Gulf War, and then the remediation, the environmental remediation solutions would always includes burden shifting. So they will clean one place and then it will damage somewhere else. So I was researching on methodologies that would look into the bigger picture, and there comes LCA. So I'm the director of the Quantitative Sustainability Lab. I have a few of my students here. So our work is basically capacity building, and we do participate in policy decision making, but it's mostly for well-being. Yeah. So these are the first batch of my students who worked on LCA. The first project was on demolition schemes and how environmentally they are. This project was recently published. This is Dr. Fatuh Al-Ragam, my student Sarah Al-Asaimi. We have worked together on AC systems and refrigerants, and by investigating the life cycle assessments, like going through the entire life cycle, this research has been published. We were challenging the protocols. We have found that the Montreal and Kyoto protocols would focus on the production rather than the use phase. And actually, they were focusing on ozone depletion, which you can see has a very smaller impact on the normalized scale when it comes to global warming. So we were challenging the international protocols while using LCA, and we have found that the substance that been, that's legal or authorized to be used in Kuwait is actually the worst when it comes to global warming. And the impact, the adverse impact on ozone depletion is not that big. This is another project that was also published last week. This is a group of undergrads. They were investigating the use of solar panels on Sabah Al Ahmed city. They have investigated the entire life cycle. They have even measured the cable length, the inverters, and all what we needed. And they have found some difficulties or that has to do with something called the duck curve, where the problems that could arise when the electricity is on grid and they have suggested problems to solve that. They have also calculated losses. This project, this project is interesting. This is Rawan al-Sammar. She's also a master's student that has graduated. Rawan al-Sammar have a family business of building fiberglass prefabricated modular structures, and she was interested in investigating the life cycle of it, especially that we use it a lot in the oil sector and in the construction sector. Unfortunately, we found that it's not that good for the environment. So we have investigated, so they go through building an entire bill of material model, and then they investigate throughout the life cycle of the building. So moving to the transportation sector, this is Dalal Ramadan. She's also a student of us now. She has also joined MIT and has graduated with honors. Dalal was interested in investigating the LCA of electrical vehicles. She found some challenges when it comes to the social aspects of LCA and in the batteries and the heat that comes from the streets and its impacts. So also her research is also published. You can check it over there. This water resources is a major part of our lab. So we have worked tremendously on desalination and power cogeneration, the LCA of it. We have also worked on treated wastewater, and currently my student is here who's gonna work inshallah on groundwater resources in Kuwait. We do use these outcomes in UNESCO annual water reports, that we submit the data to UNESCO for that from the LCA reports that we create in the lab. So we have Dr. Khawla Al-Shaiji who works with us a lot. We have published many journal papers when it comes to cogeneration, and we have investigated the impact of the energy mix and the trade-offs when we switch from natural gas to crude oils, when it comes to the efficiency and the type of pollutants. This is Sarah Al-Haddad. Sarah Al-Haddad works at Kisser, and she works at the wastewater center. Together we have published this paper that compares types of desalination, seawater desalination, with types of wastewater treatment. And then this was an interesting finding, is that although Kuwait is promoting RO wastewater, we found that it needs water to produce water. So every cubic meter of water that we need to clean, with RO from wastewater, we would use almost double the amount. So we need water to clean water, which is a problem. So we were advocating actually using tertiary wastewater to increase this amount, because the water footprint is much less. And if we're gonna produce clean wastewater with RO, then this water should be only used for injecting depleting aquifers, which is depleting in a very bad manner in Kuwait. Otherwise, we should only use this. And when it comes to desalination, we should use MED. This work has also been published. This work was published by Asma Rashidi. She won first prize in research, and this was on electrodialysis desalination, which is a form of desalination, And through life cycle assessment, we were investigating for the chemicals, the energy, and increasing water production. This is Asma. Asma has also won first place when it came to research. She was the one who investigated the RO wastewater and compared it to all three. So her research, Sarah's research builds on Asma research. So she analyzed Slabiya wastewater plant, and she found she estimated exactly the impact of chemicals that we needed. As you can see, worldwide they were promoting RO desalination because it requires less energy. But on the other hand, it consumes much more chemicals than MED and MSF, especially ferric chloride in the preliminary stages. So this was the hotspot for the environmental impact. This research was done by Anwar al-Juwaisri and Sarah al-Di'i. They were investigating the LCA for using solar power in desalination plants, and then they found it's not good. It's not enough for desalination. Solar power is good, but not for desalination. Thermal membrane, neither in membrane or solar desalination. I don't think, through the research, that it's feasible. Solar power is good, but not for this application. This research has focused on circular economy by Yasmin Al-Mzaini and Dr. Abdurrahman Slaili. Together with the lab, we have investigated the use of sewage sludge and then using it to extract nitrogen, and it was really, really feasible. This study was done also, an LCA study with Dr. Rawa Al-Jarallah from the Department of Civil Engineering, where she have analyzed 600 garbage trucks. And then through a study that combines ASTM standards with, by the way, all the standards follows the ISO protocol and other protocols that are associated with the subject matter. So using this characterization, and then we have within the lab investigated over 70 protocols on how to treat or how to deal with municipal solid waste in Kuwait. And then we found that although recycling has been advertised a lot, it might not be the best option compared to composting and animal feed. And first one is donating to the poor if you have near expiry date foods, and then animal feeds, and then composting. So recycling was not the first one, except when it comes to metals. This study was also published and was conducted by Sharifa. Sharifa works at Kuwait General Mills, and she investigated the use of near expiry date bread to be used for animal feed, and she has implemented her project. And then she compared the use of this bread as compost or fertilizer or animal feed, and then she found a tremendous impact. And actually, this project has went into practice since Sharifa already works at Kuwait General Mills, and mashallah, this is an excellent project. I wish it could be also implemented in other regions as well. This is her research, because الحين عيد الأضحى صح؟ So لازم we have sheep. The Eid is coming. So this within her study, this was the stages that she covered in her study compared to literature. This is the work of Ala. Ala also published two journal papers when it comes to converting food waste into animal feed. Ala is currently working now in KEFAS, and also she participated in a committee with the Ministry of Commerce to push this idea. يعني it's a good idea يعني for certain foods يعني to produce animal feed. Currently we have a student, she's not here صح? She's not here, that's working. Well, some of the students have already worked on this project. This project has been conducted in collaboration with Ni'mati. So Ni'mati and there is Kuwait Food Bank who takes the food. She's here, Munira. So Munira is working on this project. So every day, on average, the meals from 150 airplanes now goes to Ni'mati. And our students are weighing this food and they're breaking the meals. For example, this is crew beef. This is the network, the impact of noodles. They have even measured the small jams and the origin, the butter, the bread, and all of that. And they have estimated the environmental impact of giving it to the poor. We have also worked on other projects where we take the food from weddings at 3 a.m. in the morning and redistributing it to the poor. And currently there are 60,000 beneficiaries of that project on daily basis. So I was even supervising this until last night. And the environmental impact, plus of course the social impact is huge because all of it is good food and has been delivered as just in time. But Ni'mati is doing great job when it comes from taking the food from Kuwait Airways and then giving it to the poor. They have also went to Saudi now and they're applying this, alhamdulillah, and we're measuring the impact of this on the environment and on the landfills. We have collaborated with the Department of Petroleum Engineering. They're discussing geothermal energy. They have worked in the lab for the geothermal energy. We have groundwater here. We have recycled oils also. Some of my students, Haya is there, and Munira is working on donations, and Ghada is working on hydrogen production in QOC. She's doing the LCA for that. There are other projects that has to do with embodied energy and green roofs that has not yet been published, but the ones that you see are published except for the Kuwait Airways one, which is inshallah going to be finished soon. And thank you so much for listening.
Thanks again for Dr. Isra for sharing those wonderful projects. And I was very surprised that you guys work on many projects targeting different sectors and industries. But that's a work that we all need to be proud of. Moving to the next speaker, we'll have Nisha. Nisha is a product design and positioning engineer in Kimco, and we will listen from Nisha and learn about how LCA is implemented in Kimco.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening to all. So, thank you very much for the opportunity given to us. Thanks to Gulf Consult, thanks to Kuwait Green Building Council for this wonderful opportunity. And thank you, speakers, for wonderful insights you have given us. It was really interesting to know about the embodied carbon, operational carbon, and some of the case studies from the university as well. So, we are here as a team from Kimco, from various departments, from technical, from sales, specifications, product development, marketing, etc. And I'm Nisha Alexander, handling technical specifications for Kimco Isover. So we, Kimco Isover, are one of the leading manufacturers of mineral wool insulation, covering the glass wool and the stone wool range of products. So we are basically the joint venture between Saint-Gobain and Alganim. As you all know, Alganim is one of the largest privately owned companies in the Gulf region, and Saint-Gobain is the French leader. So we are a JV between Alganim and Saint-Gobain, and we've got 2 manufacturing units. We have our glass wool manufacturing based out of Kuwait at Shuaibah, and we have our stone wool plant at Yanbu in KSA. So we manufacture glass wool and stone wool range of products which cater to various applications, and these products have properties like acoustics, thermal, fire safety and sustainability. So covering the recycled content, because we have pretty much recycled products which are used during our manufacturing process. And when we talk about the application of our products, we cater to these 3 segments in detail, starting from industry, which covers the high temperature applications. For example, the oil and gas, refineries, power plants, where all the high temperature applications will be applied. So we have our stone wool range of products which cater to this requirement. Then going on to the building, where we cover the building interiors as well as the building exteriors. So all this will come under the building application. And then the HVAC covers all the ducting applications. So we manufacture the duct wraps, we manufacture the duct liners, we manufacture the pre-insulated ducts, we manufacture the pipe insulation which goes for the hot or the chilled water pipelines. Now, carbon neutrality is at the heart of Kimco Isover for a long time. So we strive at achieving 0 emissions by 2050 through the net zero carbon campaign, which we have launched in 2019 as a part of Saint-Gobain. So what is this? Our goal is very simple. We must not emit more carbon than what we absorb. So we must be carbon neutral. In other words, or in concrete terms, when I say this about the carbon emissions, we also help our customers to achieve very less carbon emissions in their solutions as well by using our products or solutions effectively. So how do we do this? So we actually can do it by using very less carbon emitting raw materials and the designing, by using very less energy, and by working with our partners, to deneutralize the carbon emissions. So these are very simple ways what we adapt. And therefore we have set up a very ambitious target to have 100% of our products covered by LCA by 2030. So I will be also telling you where we stand at right now in 2025 as I move on. Maybe during the end of the session, you will know where we are standing at now. So what is our action plan when we consider our roadmap for the existing products? So we already employed LCA leaders to calculate the LCAs and do the EPDs for all our products as existing products by 2030. And for the new solutions, what we do is all the new products launched or the systems, whatever we launch, has to be LCA verified, has to be LCA certified before the launching. And then when we talk about the other regulations like the EPDs, HPDs, the certifications, labels, so based on the country's requirement, we have a roadmap for doing all these certifications. So what is an LCA? Ms. Aditi has already covered, so I'm not going detailed into it. So as she rightly mentioned, the standards are based out of ISO 14040 and 14044, and even 14025 also is into our LCAs. So multi-stages method, considering all the LCAs. So we calculate LCAs from cradle to grave and not cradle to gate. So the gate stops with the manufacturing process, whereas the cradle to grave keeps on continuing till the end of life. of that product itself. Okay, and then the multi-criteria method, where our LCAs are used for eco-innovation, where we identify the main sources of a product's impact, the system's impact, building's impact, etc. And we support the decision making for a sustainable innovation. And for communication, because this LCAs is a robust proof to say that, the environmental impacts are less with our products. So what are the phases of LCA study? So all the inventory analysis, the impact assessment is shown in this picture. So when you see here, the impact assessment, where the resources depletion happens and where the inventory analysis starts with the materials and the energies. So as I spoke earlier, with the less energy, what we manufacture, there are different, life cycle of the product, starting from the raw materials, the transportation of raw materials to the manufacturing unit, then the manufacturing process involves some of the LCAs, then the logistics to transport it to the site, then the installation at the site, and then, the usage, the actual usage of the system or the product by the owner, and then comes the end of life. So this is the entire, life cycle, what happens to a product. And then when you talk about the output flows, it comes in terms of the emissions to air, to water, and the soil. So you all know about global warming, right? So the temperature of the earth is risen by few degrees every decade. Say, for example, 1 to 2 degrees is what we notice. And that is where, a lot of changes are happening on this earth. So, there are a lot of disadvantages. So you would have heard about the green gas emissions. So all this is related to the carbon dioxide emissions. So why LCA is important for manufacturers? When we talk about the environmental impact reduction, so it identifies the areas to reduce the energy, the material waste, emissions, and the footprints. And also, we can optimize the process to minimize the environmental impact. In terms of regulatory compliance, this is mandatory now with some of the countries, emerging countries, where the regulations are being framed and we'll have to comply with this. So some of our products, the EPDs are required for submissions based on the projects. And then the market demand for sustainability. So nowadays, customers prefer the eco-friendly products, driving demand for the sustainable options. As we all know, now customers are aware of sustainability, the LEED certifications, LEED points. So all these are being asked by the customers nowadays. Cost savings for sure, because it identifies the inefficiencies in material and energy use. So thereby, we reduce the cost, and optimizing the process and reducing waste to have some long-term benefits as well in terms of cost savings. Then the product innovations. So this also encourages to come up with the innovative and improved product design. And then the competitive advantage, because the customers will always opt for a sustainable product. So this gives us a competitive edge as well. Talking about the supply chain optimization, yes, we also work with our suppliers to optimize or to reduce the carbon dioxide footprints, to have less carbon dioxide emissions. Then comes the risk management and the stakeholder management, which I'm not explaining in detail, as we all know. So when I was talking in the beginning of this slide, I wanted to show this slide because this will give you an idea of where we stand. So we had a target here for 2025, and this is our roadmap. You can see that we have aimed at 138 EPDs, 206 LCAs, 5 HPDs across various countries. So when we are specific about Kuwait, so here you can see that almost more than 70% of our products are LCA certified. Okay, so this is an idea of where we stand. So this is data collected as of March 2025. And here I come to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nisha. So last but not least, we will have our last speaker before we go for a prayer break. So let's have Mr. Ravi Armujan, a lead compliance engineer at Foster and Partners. Thank you, Mr. Ravi.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. First, I would love to give the presentation while I'm seated so you can have a clear view for the screen and I can read from my papers, and so feel free to keep your attention on the visuals. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Which type of building has a lower impact on the environment? Is it a lightweight structure with extensive glazing, which typically consumes more energy? Or is it a more opaque building with minimal glazing and lower energy consumption? At first glance, the answer might seem obvious. However, with the advanced software capable of quantifying buildings' total energy impact and environmental impact across its entire life cycle, answers for such questions are no longer so straightforward. No, before. Still. Yeah. These tools allow us to move beyond general assumptions and rules of thumb. They consider a wide range of variables, from material sourcing to thermal performance and end-of-life scenarios. As a result, the environmental assessment of buildings has become a detailed process that requires data-driven analysis rather than relying on intuition or speculations. By 2060, the world is projected to add 230 billion square meters of buildings' gross floor area. This is almost equivalent of adding an entire New York City to the planet every 34 days from now until 2060. Building accounts for 39% of global carbon emissions, out of which 28% from buildings operation, hence the name operational carbon, and 11% from construction of new buildings and renovation of existing buildings, known as embodied carbon. This table outlines the various stages of buildings' life cycle. You will notice that stage B6, which is highlighted here, represents the typical scope of energy modeling, which focuses on analyzing buildings' energy use, particularly cooling and heating demands, where most operational carbon emissions occur. For decades, our understanding of sustainable buildings has largely centered around this stage. However, it's important to recognize that life cycle assessment encompasses a much broader scope. This is what life cycle assessment is. It is understanding the complete picture of a building's lifespan, from raw material extraction and manufacture, as seen in the product stage, to the building construction and products installation stage, to the operation and end-of-life stage, and even post-life impacts such as reuse and recycling. So, if a building is classified as net zero energy, which is the best possible scenario according to us and understanding, meaning that it draws no energy from the electricity grid, then is it still truly sustainable? Life cycle assessment challenges us to look beyond just operational performance and consider the full environmental cost of building from cradle to grave and even beyond. This chart represents the overall carbon emission during the lifetime of a building. Here, it is 60 years in this example. Notice how tall the first column is. That is year 0, or everything before project substantial completion, which represents the embodied carbon only from stages A1 to A5. After the project starts to operate from year 1, the green color, the B6, becomes dominant. This is the energy use of the building over the years and the source of operational carbon. The pink color of B4 and B5 refers to the replacement and refreshment, which happens, say, every 10 years, are counted with embodied carbon associated with the newly installed materials. As renewable energy systems, lighting technologies, and the thermal performance of building envelope continues to improve, the operational carbon associated with energy consumption is expected to decline significantly. As a natural result, the focus is beginning to shift towards a critical but often overlooked areas, embodied carbon. How can buildings' structural, envelope, and interior spaces impact the environment? Which structural element contributes the most to a building's carbon emission? A study conducted in Toronto analyzed the embodied carbon of structural elements across 3 building types: an office building, a mid-rise residential building, and a school. The findings revealed that horizontal slabs are the largest contributors to embodied carbon, as there is so much material incorporated there, while columns contribute the least. With the help of life cycle assessment software, it's now possible to quickly compare the environmental impact of a wide range of building components. This allows designers and engineers to make more informed, sustainable choices early in the design process. This is the material pyramid developed by the Royal Danish Academy, where materials are arranged from the ones with the highest environmental impact at the top to the ones with lowest impact at the bottom. While in the middle, we find materials such as brick, which needs to be fired during the manufacturing process, and concrete, which is well known to be a large source of emissions. At the lower part, we find materials that are more benign for the environment, like rammed earth, and at the base settles the wooden materials. So, it's better to consider materials from the bottom of the pyramid, but if we need to use materials from the top, we should use them as efficiently as possible. It's important to adopt a system approach in this regard. That is, build less, build intelligently, and build for the future. Here's an example for each. Build less can be achieved by replacing cast-in-place concrete slabs with hollow core or bubble deck slabs, which can significantly reduce the embodied carbon due to having less concrete volume without compromising structural integrity. We can build intelligently by using smaller grid span between columns, which minimizes embodied carbon due to using less elements in tension, like beams and slabs. Building for the future can be achieved if we consider designing for disassembly. This is the temporary Stadium 974 in Doha. It utilizes shipping containers and modular white steel structures similar to kids' Meccano toys, which can be screwed, then loosened. The stadium was planned to be disassembled, transported, and then reassembled in future World Cup host country. When designing buildings skin, life cycle assessment software can aid in making instant choices for materials with less environmental impact. Going back to the materials pyramid, we notice that our contemporary building skin typically uses materials from the top, including aluminium, galvanized steel, and copper. And less eco-friendly materials from the bottom can make their way to taller or even mid-sized buildings. Here's a group of wall configurations with black columns on the top representing embodied carbon of the components. We can notice that windows with aluminum frames incorporate the highest carbon emission. Again, we should think of systems approach when designing building envelopes. Building less can be best achieved by minimizing the building envelope, which not only reduces the surface area in contact with ambient temperature, thereby lowering heat gain, but also limits the amount of material required for construction. This design was our submission for the House of the Future competition last year in Dubai. Our approach focused on making the building as compact as possible by avoiding unnecessary volumetric additions or subtractions. We displaced only 2 rectilinear volumes to create a front parking area and a backyard in the rear. Given that the wall is 36 centimeters thick, we set the windows flush with the interior surface of the envelope. This allows the wall's depth to cast shadows naturally, eliminating the need for external sunbreakers or cantilevered shades. This project is a good example of building intelligently. Designed by Iraqi architect Rifat Chadarji, the building's skin recesses and extrudes to preserve privacy and filter the intense yellow sunlight. Through double reflection, the envelope reduces direct heat gain and introduces cooler, whiter daylight and minimizes glare caused by the region's dusty atmosphere. It's true that more material has been incorporated into the envelope, but this is justified as long as a genuine value is added beyond naive aesthetics. We can build for the future by specifying biogenic materials which sequesters carbon from atmosphere during photosynthesis. In the same villa we submitted for the competition, we used hemp brick for the building envelope, which serves double function, acting both as outer skin and insulation, thereby further reduction material use and improve thermal performance. At the end of building's life, hemp brick can be recycled or combusted to generate energy. Finishes are the closest elements to building occupants, and that can have the greatest impact on human health. Even if it represents a small quantity of the material in relation to the entire building, they are replaced more often, which increases the impact from the perspective of carbon emission and health. Again, we should consider systems approach when designing interior spaces. To build less, we can adopt a minimalist style for design which has many benefits. Beyond its visual clarity, which helps calm the mind in a world of constant information overload, minimalism also embodies an anti-consumerist ethos, which works against the gradual accumulation of new items over time. Building less can be achieved also by eliminating paint, for example, by utilizing raw material like exposed concrete surfaces with minimum treatment. We can build intelligently by thinking of what the components of the products we specify can be separated into and at what cost. So one of the reasons why mechanical fasteners are preferred over adhesives in manufacturing is that it facilitates our ability to disassemble products components for reuse or recycle. One of the most effective strategies to build for the future is to design buildings for flexibility. It's important that architects consider how their buildings can be adaptively reused to accommodate new functions that are different from the original functions for which the buildings were constructed. This approach helps preserve the building's embodied carbon from stages A1 to A5 by retaining its structural framework and applying minor modifications to the envelope in order to meet updated regulations. Strategies to increase buildings' potential to be easily repurposed in the future include designing compact buildings with modular structure and openings, and consider using movable partitions. Life cycle assessment can have many scopes. Cradle to gate refers to stages from A1 to A3, usually used for products. Cradle to grave encompasses A, B, and C stages where the building components end up in landfills. Cradle to cradle refers to the entire life cycle assessment stages, including A, B, C, and D, where the products are reused, recycled, or converted to energy at the end of their life, and waste is not generated from this procedure. Here are some general principles when conducting a life cycle assessment. LCA software should be used in design as well as for reporting. This means that life cycle assessment can help to achieve sustainable design even if the project is not pursuing green building certifications. Scope and level of detail should be appropriate for the need. For example, LEED V4 and V5 requires at least cradle-to-grave life cycle assessment for the building. Life cycle assessment can be performed on a whole building system or material basis. The design team is best placed to perform LCA because they understand the design intricately. However, each discipline shall contribute and not rely on the architects or the external consultant to work for all other disciplines. Doing LCA may seem difficult at first, but with experience, one can become familiar with the techniques that make conducting LCA easier, faster, and more accurate, like BIM integrations, developing templates, and recording useful information such as what EPDs represent best an average product or the typical quantity of material in a product. At the end, I would like to conclude with the following key takeaways. Impact reduction potential is greatest when life cycle assessment is conducted at the start of the project design. Reducing environmental impact occurs at all scales, from entire buildings to products. It's important to set environmental targets like percentage reductions from baseline. Life cycle assessment can be used as a design tool, not just for reporting. Thank you.
I would like to thank our keynote speaker and panelists of experts for their great presentation. And I will just like to reintroduce our speakers. We had Aditi Krintens, right? Chiston. Chitson. Okay, Aditi Chitson from OneClick. And we had Dr. Isra Al-Isa from Kuwait University, an associate professor from the Industrial Energy Department. We had also Nisha Alexander, Regional Specification Manager at GCC at Kimco. And last but not least, we had Mr. Ravi Armujan is a lead compliance engineer from Foster and Partners, and your speaker is Dr. Mohammed Abu Talib from Kuwait University Department of Earth and Environmental Science. So before we start the discussion, I will raise a few questions to our speaker, and at the end we will open the floor for Q&A. So just stay tuned, be very precise in your question and specific, and address it. Introduce yourself for sure, and address your question to the respective speaker. So my first question to Aditi. So we know there are many softwares for life cycle assessments, and OneClick is one of the upcoming ones. So what makes OneClick attractive for the construction industry, and what is your, let's say, competitive advantage over other softwares?
So one of the main unique selling points of OneClick LCA is the database. It's a huge, robust database, and that's something that we pride ourselves on updating almost every week. It doesn't matter where it is, what region it is, you have it in the database itself, and that we have a team of people that are working constantly on that front. Another part of it is the synchronization between construction and manufacturing. So you have a go-to, let's say, platform for both sides of the value chain. Those would be, the key things if I have to summarize it in, 2 points. Really.
Thank you, Aditi. Dr. Isra, so where do you see LCA standing in Kuwait? Is it in the traction phase, or it's just in the awareness phase, especially in the construction industry?
Well, we have been consulted in the lab, and we have participated in committees. We have changed the term of reference for 7 desalination plants. Like, we're not yet into the construction, maybe into demolition and recycled aggregate. We have done projects in that, but when it comes to policy making, I think we have contributed tremendously to reforming the term of reference when it comes to governmental contracts in desalination plants requirements and cogeneration energy plants.
So my follow-up question, how do you communicate life cycle thinking to policymakers or to decision makers?
Thanks for this question. Kuwait is committed to several protocols, Marrakesh, Paris, and all of that. And we show the contribution when it comes to CO2 reduction and other impacts when it comes to, for example, eutrophication of the coastal areas, or terrestrial ecotoxicity, marine ecotoxicity, even carcinogens, because we do have elevated levels of alhamdulillah, brain cancer and thyroid cancer in Kuwait. So we do, when we present our results, we do measure the impacts when it comes to that as well. And we do also measure the social aspect, which is a key selling point بالكويت, mashallah, in Kuwait.
Thank you, Dr. Isra. Nisha, so in company like Kimco, how do your clients respond to the LCA matrix, or how do they respond to EPDs, for example? So you do a good work, you have ambitious targets for having LCA for your all products, but how does client respond to that?
Well, talking about the region, as Gulf, there's a very good response because nowadays, the emerging projects are asking for the EPD certifications and the LCA calculations. And we provide EPD certifications as a part of our submittals for all our products. And basically, till now, as I mentioned, 70% of our products have already the LCA certifications. So we have our Weber team here as well. Nana, who's also supporting the LCA and the EPDs here. So as a group for the entire range of products, we do the LCAs and the EPDs, and the consultants are also, welcoming it nowadays because they look for more sustainable projects now. So when we talk about the SDDAMAs, the ratings, LEED certifications, so we provide everything.
Thank you so much for the clarification. Mr. Rabi, so you've talked about incorporating LCA in the design phase. So tell me what needs to be done, like from industries or academia, for designers to be more informed about LCA integration or LCA thinking in the process of design.
Okay. Now, it's so important to draw people's attention that life cycle assessment was a very complicated process. It is OneClick that made it easy and accessible by anyone who wants to learn it, regardless of his background. It's very simple software. All you have to do is to input the product name. So automatically there's a library of the manufacturers and the quantity that is being incorporated into the project. Now, the good thing about lifecycle assessment software is that it can allow you what-if scenarios by replacing product, by seeing different choices. It instantly gives you the environmental impact for your alternatives among 6 parameters, which is the eutrophication, the greenhouse gas emissions, the acidification, depletion of resources, and so on. So from academic point of view, the courses are online, the courses are available, they are for free, and as much as I know that OneClick have an ambition to certify around 1 million certified with OneClick by 2030. Yeah, so that's something really very ambitious thing to pursue, but the courses are available online for those who want to learn it.
That's very good. So that takes me to another question for OneClick then. So don't you think it could be misleading for having such a big library where local data is needed, especially in the GCC? So most of the data that are available on LCA, or what we call LCIs, life cycle inventory, are European or American data. So how can a consumer in this region benefit from the data that you guys have?
Actually, that's quite a good question because I was just talking about that during the break. So maybe one clarification I would just make in terms of data is we incorporate all the data that is available, published or available through generic databases published. Furthermore, and you're right that a lot of data is more or less, European specific as a whole. This is something that is, put into transparently into the data cards that are shown, so people understand what kind of data that they are choosing when they are using or looking at data themselves. But they also do have the option to localize that data as well to the regional specific context. And there are some data sets that we also do for them. So this is something that we have been doing since quite a while, is localization of the data, applying it to the local context. So maybe Kuwait today or Qatar tomorrow. This is something that has been used, therefore, by, all the assessments that are done moving forward. So yes, it's all the data that is there, but it's also then localized, not just by us, but they can also do it themselves. Of course, for that, they need to have a certain bit of a background and maybe understand what kind of impacts would be specific to the region if they are to do it themselves. So that would be a bit more educational, I would say, from that regard.
Thanks. I have a question for any panelist. So if any one of the esteemed panelists would like to respond. So we live in a society where we don't like sharing data, or we are conservative when it comes to our data, especially industries, as well as government, I would say. So how can we overcome that burden, especially in LCA, you need access to data. So how can we overcome this problem?
So when you look at our EPD certifications, it is a minimum of 15 to 16 page certificate, which gives you the clear LCA calculations right from the start to the end. So we are so open in giving the data. So when a consultant asks for the EPDs, like for example, in UAE, we had a customer where we had to compare the EPDs between us and the competition. And we found that our CO2 emissions were 30% lesser. So, we were so transparent in giving the EPD calculations, and all our EPDs will include the LCA calculations in detail. It's a minimum of 15 to 16 page certification, third party verified, what we share.
Thank you so much. Well, it's part of the ISO that we disclose the data, our inventory data, so people can compare. So all of our published work contains data in the appendices for reviewers to check and for other researchers to compare against. So
the challenge I see, like, how would you get the data from the industries themselves if you need data on a specific process? So did you find any difficulties getting those data? You've worked with the Ministry of Electricity and Water, right? Maybe because you were like from Kuwait University, it was easier to get some of the data. But why don't we have our own library, life cycle inventory library in Kuwait? Maybe this is an ambitious goal, but we should at any stage. So I would like to give the floor the questions. Please introduce yourself and specify the panelists, or you can have a general question. Sure, Aditi.
I'll just add one thing to what you just said. I think a lot of governments as well as ministries are looking into having specific data for the region or the country itself. I do know, this is a common example, but Nordics are one of the main front running companies, I would say, where they have put in place basically calculation method as well as specific data that needs to be used. And this would be industry specific unless a customer or unless a consultant uses EPD specific data. Then of course that is the data that is there. But as much as I know, there are also a lot of countries that are trying to gather and put together a database as a whole to help this scaling up of utilizing data across in a country itself. So just some examples that I thought.
Okay, thank you, Aditi. So let's open questions for the audience. So if you have any question, please raise your hand and you'll get the mic. Please ask questions before I ask more questions.
So thank you for today. Just a small introduction about myself. I'm Richard Rahal, General Manager for Saint-Gobain Weber. It's the part where Nisha, she was mentioning. We are the mortar part, where we have more than 70% of our products are LCA, and almost, let's say, 40% of the APDs in Kuwait in construction, we are having it as well. So my question is a general one. As we know now, all the constructions are going in the Public Authority of Housing Welfare, where really there is mega cities going on, like Saad Al Abdullah, before Mutla, Wafra. So how we can really do some input on the level of the ministries to highlight the importance of using such materials in creating a sustainable future for all of us, because this is really mega projects that we need. So just thoughts from our side, and with Kimco, we are trying to really advocate and making some changes, and by doing some presentations, and but we need from the universities, from other like Kuwait Green Building Council, to give some really pressure in changing the policies immediately in order to benefit from such type of products. Thank you.
To respond to that, we don't have any government representatives, but I think it's when you talk about regulations, that needs a governing body like EPA or Kuwait Environmental Protection Agency to set up regulations and rules, as well as local certification such as LEED. So until now, all the companies, they are like voluntary going for certification as a part of their environmental stewardship, sustainability goals, and so on. But I totally agree. In future, regulation will play a big role in advancing the use of LCA. Well, a great green, I think.
I mean, I understand like the overall aim is to increase, like it's to change policy, to encourage more sustainable choices, and not just about LCA, also about like energy choices and like water preservation choices. It's unfortunate that the government is not progressive in that sense. And I feel like whenever that decision is made is because it's already been done on the ground, and there's a huge adaptation from the private sector, and there's advocacy from the civil society. And this where the government reacts and then maybe enforces policies. So I feel like what we're trying to do with these sessions, we're bringing everyone together, is just build up that momentum for LCA, for other sustainable choices, and hope that the government would react, would find like the benefit of that, and the economic also benefit of that, and not just the environmental benefit of that. So the more we create synergies between manufacturers, designers, and I'm not even talking like academics, I'm really hoping the government will jump into that discussion later on. So yeah.
Oh, thanks, Dalal. I would like to add one point. Probably we should change the language we speak when we talk to governments. By speaking of economic factors. So just sometimes if you communicate tons of carbons, so that doesn't bring a bill for a decision maker. So talking in money values, talking in savings, saving CO2 emissions means saving energy in many parts, which means saving money. So burning less oil, exporting the oil instead of burning the oil for electricity generation. I think this is a problem as academics that we face because we communicate science, which is not always appropriate for policymakers.
Thank you so much. So two of my students have participated in a governmental committee with the Ministry of Commerce, going back to the economy, which is Ala Al-Saleh and Sharifa Al-Jaber. Both of them with the هيئة الغذاء والتغذية, Public Authority for Food and Drugs, or Nutrition, Public Authority for Food and Nutrition. They have changed one thing. So يعني the baby steps do really make a big impact. So they change the label from expiry date for foods to best before. So this really saved a lot of foods from being disposed and being sold for a marginal price. So the grocery stores would benefit from that, and also the landfill, we think, would be reduced. And this was one output from learning LCA with the students. So this just small change really makes. So I think the same goes with building materials. Baby steps would make a big impact when they would see the economic aspect and the environmental aspect.
Thank you, Dr. Isra. Do we have any other questions? See some hands back there.
Hi. This one is not exactly a question, but it's more of a concern. I work for Vicona and Architectural Aluminum Systems, and it's part of Hydro Group, which is one of the pioneer in aluminum recycling. And it's not just about recycling aluminum. It is, when we say aluminum, it is infinitely recyclable. But what we do, or how we are different, is we are using the post-consumer recycled content. There is a big difference between pre-consumer and the post-consumer scrap. So what we do is the pre-consumer scrap to recycle into aluminum, and then that's how the building systems are again produced. So we have invested a lot of effort in trying to educate the building industry and the stakeholders in using this and to reduce the embodied carbon. But what eventually happens is most of the building industry stakeholders resort to this greenwashing the projects, and then it tends to out that it is just recycled content which is mentioned in the specifications. So that's something which needs to be addressed.
Well, this is a very interesting topic. Do I have any opinion about environmental labeling here? So environmental labeling is you can have false statements. You can have greenwashing by having some labels, but that's why you need to be aware of the approved or certified labels that are out there, such as Environmental Product Declaration, which requires LCA. So any insights on labeling when it comes to LCA?
This is actually also something that we get asked quite a lot, to be honest. Like, for example, one of the main questions is, how can we, like, if we just do this, can we just, state this thing on the product itself? And that's quite openly asked as well. And it is a big concern because if you look at it right now, we are also, pushing and scaling up product transparency quite a lot across the industry. But in that aspect, we're also, not having or not being able to look at all the specific details. And a lot of times there has been cases even from our side itself where we've also noticed EPDs done incorrectly. And that's a big concern as well, calculations done incorrectly, or not having verification statements on an EPD, which is something that basically leads to greenwashing as a whole, because you can just say you can, have anything in the EPD. It is checked, yes, but there are a lot of products that may not be third-party verified, which is what the basic document requires you to have. They can just be internally verified. So there are a lot of things, and this is something that we've tried to curb since 2020, when the rise of EPDs actually started, in order to actually check whether it's external verification or internal verification. And that's one of the differentiating factors that we've tried to put more and more into place for this. Or even if the EPD, for example, it's been done now, according to new standards, so the ISO version of 14025, as what Nisha mentioned before, has an EN version, the European version, which just recently got updated in 2019. And there is this transition point between the old version and the new version. And there's a lot of chaos that still happens in between that. So this is something that we try to even show within the software as well, that, hey, when you're looking at data, please be aware that maybe this is missing or this is not there, and this needs to, go back. We've also asked the manufacturers to go back and repeat the EPD process at times because of not having the correct level of data, or because it was just an error, maybe neglected somehow. But yes, it has been quite common, and these are certain steps that we can take, of course, but it's also up to the manufacturer, up to the verifier to thoroughly check it. And I think we do need to have certain, checkpoints in place, let's say, for this.
Thank you, Aditi. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Engineer Mohammed from Kite. My question is to you, Aditi. You mentioned you guys are one of the upcoming softwares in the market. So how does your software come in comparison to other LCA softwares available in the market? And how do you guys maintain transparency over it? Like the data that's being analyzed? Because I'm aware of a few softwares that are not typically that transparent when showing data or giving conclusions. So how do you guys tackle something like that? And in terms of your database that you mentioned for construction that's being updated, how does it compare to other databases that are available in the market, like EcoInvent, Industry 2.0, and so on?
So the first question was in regards to differentiation, right, between different LCA softwares. So as I said before, we work both on the construction and the manufacturing side. When it comes to construction, it's literally specific to construction. There are a lot of LCA softwares that are quite generalized in terms of industry as a whole. But for us, the niche is specific construction because, as I mentioned before, it's one of the leading industries, causing so much environmental damage and where you have so much emissions coming from. So that's, let's say, a bit of a differentiation between other LCA softwares as a whole. In terms of the second point about data and transparency in data, as I just said, one thing that we make sure to also have is whether with these data cards that are within the tool itself, they actually say where the data comes from. So upstream databases, downstream databases, what verification method was used, so that the customer who is actually going to use it is able to understand what it is and then utilize it in the calculation process. So that's one of the distinctions as a whole. And in terms of integrating the data itself, this is like one thing that the data team has to check repeatedly, day after day, week after week, because of the sheer volume with which the data has increased, like over the past 2 years. So this is one of the main criteria that we have to put in place as a whole, no matter what happens, because it's quite easy for anyone to just say and utilize it. But we do have EcoInvent data. So the types of data that we incorporate are generic databases like EcoInvent, then EPDs, so product-specific manufactured data, also privately licensed databases if they are in different countries themselves. So for example, Australia and New Zealand has their own private database that is done specifically for the country itself. And then any other data that the user can add in, but that is on them. It's not available for everyone else. So it's just on them themselves. So those are private data sets for their own use, whatever they add based on local context maybe.
Hello, Yusuf Al-Ujeri. I am head of sustainability and energy at Gulf Consult. So I'm just wondering because so sustainability measures and LCA and life cycle assessment, we're mostly targeting, especially in Kuwait, large companies, large developments, government sector, but the private villas and houses are completely out of the picture. There's no incentive, for life cycle assessment or to care about the energy consumption and all that. So what is the solution here, especially in Kuwait? Can we speak to them, as Dr. Mohammed said, another language? Maybe talk to them about health, can we bring in sustainability? Can we convince that a sustainable house is a healthier house, a healthier home for, so we talk about their health instead of sustainability.
Believe it or not, I think some companies has responded to environmental impacts more than social well-being. Like, for example, we're feeding, for example, the poor every night. So 60,000 per year. So when we come to the companies who are donating foods, and there are plenty, when you talk to them about the CO2 that they're saving, sometimes they're more concerned to that than the mouths they're feeding. I have been doing this for 15 years with companies donating foods that are near expiry or cooked foods. So when I come to them and say, okay, you can put this on your corporate social responsibility, that you're reducing, you're contributing to CO2 reduction and methane emissions from landfills, they're much happier in communicating that on their website than the number of families that they're feeding. What's nice that when we're feeding families, we're saving from their income. صح? Food is expensive, although it's cheaper in Kuwait compared to other countries. These families are changing schools. They're going to better schools. So when we communicate this to the companies that are donating foods, they're more concerned to the CO2 emissions that they put on their website sometimes. So this do impact the families and the households. But whatever helps in greening their corporate image. And that's what I have seen through the years. While working
I
with
think the question was, if you allow me to rephrase the question, companies for sure they have agendas, right? They have KPIs they want to meet. They have reporting that they want make it fit to their reporting system. But I think the question was more about how do you convince customers or private customers or just individuals, just regular people who you meet every day.
Yeah. Well, communicating LCA data sometimes is difficult, but communicating the end results of environmental impacts by example is stronger than LCA, I think. For example, my clothes, when I say, which is true, my clothes is manufactured in Kuwait. So I would say, do you know the impact? And it's true, both my my top and my shirt are manufactured in Kuwait. Do you know how much CO2 I have saved? And the same thing when I mix my own perfume, for example. Do you know that saves 90% of the carbon footprint when you do your own perfume, and it's even nicer, it's stronger. When you say that, it's sometimes it makes a difference. Yeah.
Sure.
So it's a very good question what you've asked. So just to answer your question from the manufacturing point of view, two things I would like to highlight. One is the health aspect for sure. So I was talking about HPDs. So we have the certifications for health and safety, which says that our products are absolutely safe to use for any kind of a building. Secondly, we focus more on energy savings in terms of, kilowatt per annum savings. We talk about payback to the customers. When you talk about private owned villas, the owners, or any kind of building, say for instance, so we talk to them about the payback. We've got some specific softwares to help the customers for the payback, energy savings, like how much of money can be saved per annum, and this attracts the customers. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions, or is this the time to close? I have one more question. So, if you guys are aware of LCA, and we have all the experts here. So, in LCA, we always have a functional unit. So, Dr. Isra Al-Isa, I would like to get your opinion about what is a representative functional unit in the construction industry. Residential, I would say residential construction. Do we compare tons of concrete? Do we compare the function of a house? So what? So because like Mr. Ravi, he mentioned about when you design, like you can have the same capacity of building, but with design it changes the entire thing. So what is a good representative functional unit that you would choose? So just to be aware of a functional unit, like in life cycle assessment, you need to compare apple to apple. So if I want to compare apple to apple in construction industry, I can comparing like 1 cubic meter of concrete versus 1 cubic meter of wood. Is this a good functional unit, or should we look at the bigger picture?
Okay, now the most important thing is to set ambitious targets. For example, you compare your building to a baseline and you set a percentage saving below that baseline, that your carbon emissions or the carbon equivalent emissions will be reduced by 20% or 30%. And based on that, you start to design. Sometimes it happens that your percentage of saving swings below or above that target, but it's very important to set a baseline that is maybe the norm in the region. So this is your benchmark to which your building savings will be compared with. So that's the answer.
Yeah. So this makes a very good exam question. Yeah. What is a reasonable functional unit for the construction industry? So if my students are there, I would really ask them this question. Today was their LCA final, so they should be ready. Huh? Come on. Can I ask them what would be a good functional unit for construction, since today was your final, 8 to 10 a.m. So what do you think?
Based on what function you look at the construction. Okay, so it's based on how you look at the construction. Is it you just want to compare it to something? You want to understand the function of the construction. It will be used for the functions that people will actually use it for. فمثلا ممكن نقول إيه? We can say that if the function of the house or the construction or the building, whatever, is for education, the services that will be included, based on that ممكن نقول مثلا functional unit, how many classrooms الbuilding blocks of this building. It's basically based on the function you intend. أنا حاسة كده. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll grade her answer. So that's correct. So you do assess the function. So for a household, you would say, how many people would live in this household comfortably, maybe 25 degrees Celsius, with a building strength of 350K, for example, with this amount of electricity. So you will give this electricity and you will have this number of people. If it's an educational facility, then you would measure the flux. And then your reference flow, which is the materials that you would use, is part of your comparison. But functional unit will be the specifications of living like. So thank you. Shukran. Yeah, good job.
Thank you. In closing, on behalf of the organizing committee, I want to thank all speakers and panelists that we had today, and also I extend my thanks to Gulf Consult for hosting this important event with the Kuwait Green Building Council, and we wish to have more frequent events similar to this one in future. And thanks all for being here, and yeah, please scan the code or the QR code and fill up the survey for future. So that's your calendar, right? Okay. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure being with you.